Hello and welcome to episode 4 of the Product Design podcast. For those of you who don't know or couldn't guess by the title, this is a series of talks where I'll be picking the brains of industry experts, exploring different topics within product and design. I have the pleasure of being joined today by my good friend Timo Stosius, and today we'll be exploring the topics of digitizing the education space and being the founding designer of a startup, and hiring designers in the early stage. Timo, again, pleasure to have you on here. Please could you just start by giving a quick overview of your career so far?
Of course. Thank you very much, and welcome from my side as well. I've had the huge privilege for the past 5 years to co-build up Sdui. We provide a central platform for communication and organization in schools to connect all students, teachers, and parents. And I've had the honor to build up everything that's related to design and marketing for the first years. I've basically been doing everything related to our brand. So when we firstly started, everything that somewhat needed to be designed or was related to our brand and to communication. And yeah, we grew to 150 employees. So it was the right product for the right time. And yeah, basically that's the quick journey.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think timing was of the essence with you guys for sure, and obviously we'll delve a little bit deeper into that later in the podcast too. So just in terms of before your time at Sdui, what were you doing, just so everyone can know?
Yeah, so I consider myself to be a design-driven problem solver, you could say, and
Yeah.
I've had the fun just designing things from very early on. I've actually come into graffiti when I was 12 years old, and I realized I have a passion to leave traces, like to create things that other people see. And I don't do graffiti anymore, but basically doing design is something similar, right? You just create things that other people see or use. And I've been into art a little and wanted to study product design, actually, like physical product design. And I've worked for some time in the advertising scene in an agency in Munich. But eventually I realized that I sort of like to do a lot of different things, and I didn't want to be in the advertising area for my whole life. And actually then when I just started to study, it was when Daniel, our CEO and co-founder of Sdui, reached out to me and asked if I would like to join the very early founding team to build up the design and marketing. So it was very early actually in my career that I've had this privilege. I dropped out of university for that. It was some kind of a risk, obviously, but actually I've talked to profs, and they said actually that some other people would be happy to have such privilege, and I should just go for it and see if I later can go back to university if I need it. And so far I have not needed.
Definitely. Yeah, I'm sure you definitely don't regret the decision to leave uni early to build Sdui for sure. Okay, cool. So obviously the first topic we wanted to cover off was digitizing the education space, and obviously the next part would be obviously being a designer at such an early stage and being the founding designer there. First thing I wanted to cover off really was, obviously education as a whole, I think traditionally has been quite far behind in terms of digitizing a lot of areas that has been needed to or could have been digitized, of course. Why do you think personally has been difficult? Why do you think education is further behind a lot of other industries in terms of digitizing or going digital?
I guess there's two reasons. One is simply because the market is really fragmented, or like schools have various kind of requirements and habits to do things. We can talk about this later, but I think the more important reason is just because it's grown like this historically. Like when we move back some 100 years when schools started, there was no other way to teach children than grouping them, having like 30 people in the room, having one teacher in the front, and he would be the expert to talk about everything. And they've had books, and that was it, right? So it's grown historically like this, and we didn't have the point where the whole society would kind of step back from that to challenge it and sort of rethink it with the modern possibilities we have. And obviously, because schools, there's not the competition like you have in the market where you really have the need for innovation, right? And so schools would just continue like it used to be for years. And I personally think that most schools are sort of an island that's isolated from the actual world that most people live in. So I've went to school for 15 years and I've learned so less comparatively to the past 5 years at Sdui, right? And you talk so much about theoretical problems, and you learn really a lot of things that you don't really need for the later life. I guess everyone knows that sort of, and that's so sad because everyone knows it, but still we have it like this. But I also like to talk about it with a metaphor. So when I asked, okay, if our educational system was a vehicle, what kind of vehicle would it be? Like, would it be a fast car, like a sports car, for example, or would it be something rather old-fashioned? And I would say, yeah, it would be a very old-fashioned thing. It would be a Kutsche, we say in Germany. Let me look at, like a coach, I guess you say, the wooden thing with two horses in the front.
Of course,
That's like what it was. Like, it used to be modern at some point in time, but today it's inefficient. It's not state of the art. And what we do, unfortunately, with digitization in a lot of schools is we don't rethink the vehicle at all, like the system. We basically just put a screen into that coach. And we say, we sort of use digital tools to still run the old system, which is a little sad. But we with Sdui, we have the vision that we sort of in the first step digitize the processes and the school life as it is today, this old-fashioned system. And once we have a digital infrastructure in schools, we have whole new possibilities to rethink the system overall, right? Something like very personalized learning experiences. You really need an infrastructure if you wouldn't have classes at some point anymore to kind of still organize that daily life and to have a connection between students and teachers in some way, no matter what the role of a teacher is at the end.
For sure. And I completely agree with everything you said. I think obviously I went through school as well, and generally, as you said, it was exactly you have a teacher and standing in front of 30, potentially 30 students who all come from different backgrounds, who all have different interests, or all at different stages of their learning and things like that. And it does become very difficult and to really understand the individual, where they want to get to, how you can nurture their learning and take them where they need to be. I also completely agree that probably 90% of what you learn in school you won't take into future life. I think there are much more valuable things that could be taught at school that would actually really generally benefit people.
And I think what could change the system as well is if you could only become a teacher after having worked in the public market for some years. Like if you would need to work in a business first and then go into school, you would have a lot more feeling for what life is actually like outside of schools, right? Most teachers, they go to school when they are children themselves, then go to university, then go back to school. And it's always about grades, it's always about exams. Like that's the whole way of thinking, right? And there's some examples like in a school assignment, it's sometimes about, okay, you need to write at least 5 pages to prove that point, right? And everyone knows in business is you have maximum 30 seconds for your pitch, otherwise I'm out, right?
Exactly. I literally saw a post on LinkedIn. I can't remember who it was from, but I saw that exact post on LinkedIn. I think it was yesterday actually. I saw it and I was like, it's so right. In when you write a dissertation for a university or something like that, that's thousands and thousands of words, information that there's how many words you have to put into the how you're explaining or solving this problem, or whatever you're writing about essentially. But when you're in business, you have very limited time to make your point and try and solve a problem there. And I think just from looking at some of the most successful entrepreneurs in tech, in any area of business, a lot of them dropped out of school, a lot of them didn't do very well in school, but it's they took it upon themselves to really learn what, how business works, how you can be successful in business. And a lot of it wasn't, turn up to history, geography lessons that you're not, you're not interested in, or you have no interest in taking further, for sure. When it comes to digitizing in education, where do you see still that there are big or huge gaps that can be solved by digitizing?
So luckily, due to COVID also, we are in quite a okay place with the communication and organization in schools. So actually, this infrastructure part, I would say, is okay in average, but there's still huge potential in asking what actually do we learn and how do we learn. Right, so it's still basically just, as I mentioned, the system. Students still need to learn math stuff, even though maybe they want to become an artist, or so, like, to put it very simply. And I think we could go more into personalized learning experiences to really leverage the strengths and interests and passions of young children. I guess there's huge potential, and there's some companies that sort of work on that, but I guess the wider market still doesn't have a lot of this. And also, what we personally experience with Sdui, most schools have some communication solutions. So, for example, a school messenger or whatever, they use some tools for video conferencing because they had to during COVID. But it is still fragmented. So they would have 15 various tools to do things. And what we built with Sdui is this central all-in-one platform, because it just makes sense, right? No teacher and no student wants to have 5 different school apps and switch between those. Also, it's a lot of administrative effort. And we want to connect the dots, or we do connect the dots. So we have everything in one place, and also we can use the various features to have smarter workflows. So one example is we have a wide range of features, and one of them is the timetable. So we connect to the timetable data of the school, and then we use this data to create groups. So the first time you sign up as a teacher, if you were like the class teacher of 7A, you would directly have your chat group with all students from 7A and one chat group with all parents from 7A, right? That's fully automatically. You don't need to manually set something up. And also we create one cloud folder for each of these groups and automatically assign the permissions to all the members of these groups. Right. So we use the timetable data for various features, and I think this is something that just makes sense, because otherwise it would be way too much administrative effort.
No, I completely agree. I also think that as you said, teachers generally go to school, then they study at university and then go back to school as teachers, and probably, if they're not technology teachers or have used computers quite often, they might be quite far behind in terms of using digital products, how they can actually benefit them. I know certainly from when I was in school, pretty much everything was still done on paper. All your files, records were kept in a paper folder. The registers, everything like that was all done through paper. Attendance, everything like that, it was all kept in physical diaries that you had to write on. But I think certainly Sdui has solved quite a few of those issues. I know something you mentioned obviously was COVID and the pandemic. I think that's the next topic I wanted to cover off, really, was, of course, the pandemic hit so many different industries badly in a negative way, and a lot of industries are still struggling from that. However, in your situation and Stui's situation, certainly the demand and a need for products that like Sdui offer came to light much more, and the need for them grew substantially. So run me through how the pandemic impacted you guys, and obviously the effects in a positive manner, let's say.
Yeah. So pre-COVID, some schools regarded something like Sdui as nice to have. I think, we like that's cool. And when COVID hit, it was essential, right? It was the only way you could still be in touch And the only way as a teacher, for example, you could even inform the students about when they need to go back to school, right? So it was a little weird because during the first lockdown, everyone was like, okay, we're now taking a break as society. And like some people were, okay, time to calm down and learn a new hobby or whatever.
Yeah.
And we were like 24/7 struggling to keep the platform alive, right?
Yeah.
And we were really, really, I remember some days I would wake up in the morning, I would work, have like 5 minutes to go to the toilet and then work, and at the evening go back to bed and sleep. That's literally what some days were, just because we were so everyone really knew that, okay, this is our mission to really show that Sdui makes sense, that Sdui works, and they really rely on us. And so at the first lockdown, we were sort of onboarding, like before the lockdown, we were onboarding like 10 schools per month, 10 new schools. The onboarding process is quite comprehensive because we need to connect to the timetable software. We need to create automatically these accounts for all the students and teachers and parents. They are personalized, and some more things we need to set up. So it was a lot of effort. And 10 schools per month. And in the first lockdown, we suddenly had to onboard 50 per week. So it was massive, and we really had like meetings to figure out, okay, how can we do this? What is the maximum number of schools we can onboard? And that actually was a real boost at the end. Like it really helped us to structure our processes more efficiently, to really grow basically in a way that otherwise we would have needed 1 or 2 years for within 1 or 2 months. And as bad as COVID really is, and was for a lot of people, I'm happy that for our case and for the digital education space, it was it also had advantages.
Yeah, sure. Well, it sounds like certainly a hectic time. However, obviously massively beneficial for you and obviously the company as a whole, for sure. When at the start of COVID, before, as you said, you were onboarding about 10 schools per month. Regarding products, was it a case of there was one core product before COVID, and then COVID actually allowed you to build and develop new products from there, or did it sort of stick? Did you have the products in line to build in the near future, but sort of COVID maybe fast track that?
So pre-COVID, we had as core features a news feed, we had a chat, so messaging, we had the cloud, and basically like some integrations with Space and the app where you can integrate other solutions, and the timetable, obviously. So that was like the basic setup. But actually so that already had some schools, but the most requested one obviously was video conferencing. And we didn't have that pre-COVID. And so within several weeks, we had to build that. And that was stressful, but it has turned out still today to be one of the most important features which we could add.
Yeah, certainly. I was going to say video conferencing. Obviously, there is tons of different video conferencing platforms out there that are possible to use. But as you said, the education space is very fragmented. There's lots of different things that were available at the time, and having it all in one central location, of course, would massively benefit people to not have to switch to Zoom or switch to Teams or anything else that was there if it was all in one central platform. But of course, the demand meant that it had to be built pretty quickly, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And some obviously our app wasn't 100% stable all the time. Like basically all apps that were highly requested during the first lockdowns, just because even if you have the best experts on your team and the best servers, there are some things, right, you can not anticipate until you actually have the usage like 10 times more than one day before. And I'm so sorry for some users who really wrote angry emails or bad reviews on the internet when the app was down for an hour. But actually, the fact that they were so upset showed how important our app was at that time, right? Because if it was not relevant, they wouldn't have bothered. So yeah, actually some of them really said, okay, you saved us, like it's what some teachers said. And I'm very happy we could do this with the video conferencing. We've had some help from other partners to set that up, so we were very thankful for all that.
Yeah, definitely. No, as you said, I think the angry emails were all in good faith, really. As you said, it was clear to see that they really needed it. And look, of course, when demand goes up like that, you're a new business. It's all of a sudden, business is doubled, tripled. However, got 10 times greater. It's obviously there are going to be some teething problems with new products. Certainly, there always is. Generally, no matter how long you have to build them, and especially when you only have, as I said, weeks to build a whole new part to your product, for sure. So I want to take it back to the real start, Timo. I know, obviously, you said you were approached by a co-founder at university to come on board and help build Sdui. How did it all come about? Where did the idea come from? How did he, why did he approach you specifically to come on board?
Yeah, so it actually started as a school project back when the original founders were still students, and one of the co-founders, Jan Micha, he's the technical co-founder, he built his first app when he was like 8 years old or so. And so often they would go to school in the morning, and then they would realize the first lesson was canceled. And as a student, that really bothers you, right? You could have slept longer. Now you're sitting there and waiting. And so they just started to build an app that would show the timetable with like substitutions, if there were some, or canceled lessons, already at home, so you could just sleep longer. That's really the basic idea. And as a school project, that was quite successful, like won some awards at Jugendforscht, if someone knows that. And eventually they realized, okay, after they had finished school, okay, we could turn this into a business. But it wasn't really like we could turn this into a business. It was more like, okay, other schools could need this as well. So why don't we sell it to them? Or even give it away for free? Like there's also a thought that came up in the beginning. And then obviously they thought about what other features could there be helpful. Okay, a newsfeed, cool. In the very first version, it was only the school admin could send news, and not all teachers or whatsoever. And just having a way to share files. So that's the 3 core ideas. But the focus was really the timetable. And then I got to know Daniel in England, actually. So we did some kind of a short-term study in theology after school, the both of us, and we get to know there. And he found out that I was doing something with design, and so he actually, when he reached out to me, he only wanted to have a brochure. As a freelance designer, I should do a brochure for them. And then we had some phone calls about it, and they were like, "Yeah, we are just starting this business, and it's super exciting." And we had a lot of conversations, and I had some ideas of what to do and whatsoever. And there was just such a good kind of chemistry. That even before I got to design the first draft for the brochure, he said, "Okay, we want to have you on board to build this whole thing up with us." And then I was living in Krefeld, near Cologne, actually at that time, and he was based in Koblenz with the other co-founder. And so I would drive there for 1 week per day or so. And I thought, okay, it's running a startup. I could just do this besides my studies. I could switch because it's just 1 day per week. I thought easy going, but it really fastly turned out that this wouldn't work at all.
Definitely.
And so we've had the first meetings at the kitchen table and Daniel's home. And we thought, okay, what do we need now? We need a website. We need this brochure. We need a pitch deck. We need business cards. Obviously, all of us were chief, blah, blah, blah. Even though we had no team members. So we need a social media profile. And we started to set up this everything and did some first cold calls, or actually we drove to schools to sell to them. And sometimes they would shout at us, even be super angry, like, because we were unexperienced children, sort of. And they were like, "We don't need this, go away." It was hard, it was tough, but eventually we've had the first positive feedback, and we won some startup pitches. And when the first schools wanted to start with Sdui, they said, yeah, okay, let's do this. We're going to sign a contract. So the business model is obviously that we sell a license to the whole school.
Sure.
It depends a little on the amount of users, but the school pays for it. And when we signed the first schools, we didn't actually know, like, okay, how do we now onboard them? Like, how do they get their accounts? We didn't really have a system in place. We were just selling. And so actually 1 or 2 nights before we had to sort of onboard a new school, we built up a system that they would have these activation codes. We would print them on a sheet, and every student would get his activation code. He could sign up with that to the app and then define a password and so on. And then we had a school with like 2,500 students. It was a Berufsschule, we say, like a professional school.
Yeah.
And we had to print these 2,500 pages. And we only had a very small printer in the office. And it would always, when you print so long, we even needed to print both sides because we had to put the data privacy declaration on the back. And when you have to print both sides and the printer runs for so long, it turns hot. And the heat made the paper become wavy, and then it would be stuck in the printer. So it went actually for the whole day and night, and I would sleep next to the printer, and every like 10 minutes or so, I would need to get the printer, the chunk out of it, and make sure it continues to print. And then at 9 in the morning, we had a box in the office that we just got from IKEA, and we put all these sheets in there, and then we drove to the school and handed it over to them. Like
that's crazy.
That was crazy. And like today, this whole process is fully digital, fully optimized, of course, and so on. We have a huge customer success team. But we were sort of students who had to figure out how to do this and learn along the way. But it was a lot of, like, it was challenging, but also a lot of fun, to be honest.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's crazy, like, listening to some of the startup stories, because a lot of it does happen like that. Some of it's a lot of it's about friends or colleagues or whatever it might be coming together, and sometimes it's like in the weirdest places that you just sort of brainstorm ideas and it all starts to flow, and then you take the leap of faith and build it. Sleeping next to the printer. It's such a good story. But it sounds like obviously it's been an incredible journey over the last 5 years, from, as you said, sleeping next to the printer to now everything being digitized, being in how many schools are you integrated into now?
We have around 5,000 schools working with our software.
Yeah, so it's gone from sleeping next to the printer with the first few customers to now 5,000 schools, which is an incredible journey. And of course, it's forever increasing. It's still being successful, which is really good to hear. So when you became the founding designer, obviously, challenge-wise, sleeping next to the printer is definitely a challenge in itself. But what did you see as the biggest challenges, or what has been the biggest challenges that you've overcome in the early parts of the business starting?
Mm-hmm. So when I started, I was quite a perfectionist, as a lot of designers probably are. You really want to make things like super clean, super nice, and I had to get rid of that. And we had some discussions on that. It was sort of hard because you're really so passionate about it, right? As a designer, you just want to make it perfect. You feel like you're Steve Jobs and whatever. But we really had to learn, okay, what creates value and what doesn't. So I in the first times, I would sometimes spend 2 hours thinking about the perfect border radius of our buttons, right? But that really didn't create any value at all. If a school decides for Sdui, they definitely do not do because of the border radius, and I think
of course
that was a learning. Another mistake, actually, or learning, I think we spent a little too much effort on making things fancy. Like, we were building fancy designs, but not good designs. And I see that in other startups as well. You add a lot of shadows and make it fancy and nice gradients and a lot of white space. And it, on the first view, it feels like nice design or good design. It feels designy. But at the end, what design really is is the balance of aesthetics and functionality, right? So it needs to look nice, but it also needs to work. If it was more the aesthetic side, it was art. If it was more the functionality side, it was engineering. But a good design needs to look nice, but also work. And especially for UX and UI, I realized the whole UX side of things, the actual experience, is sometimes more important than the visual side on the other. And we had to figure out this along the path. And a good example, actually, that I have experienced from my own usage is Shopify. I think when you use the backend, like the administration side of Shopify, it sort of looks a little old-fashioned, somehow like Windows 2000. But it is super usable, super nice and seamless to use. And that was a learning for us.
Yeah, definitely. No, completely agree. I think every designer would say that they want to create, picture perfect design that looks incredible, right? But sometimes that's not what the users want, right? Sometimes it's not functional.
Absolutely.
Sometimes it's massively dependent on what your users want. And I think that's where designs come on so much in the last few years, certainly since the pandemic as well. The need to digitize, the need for digital products has obviously increased massively, and the need for product designers to be put into businesses has increased massively as well. However, I think the best businesses, i.e., Shopify as an example, we use the best businesses with the best digital products are the ones who understand the design that their user wants, or the user experience that their user wants, as opposed to what the designers who work there believe or deem it to be. If
absolutely.
I think a lot of problems that businesses face, and I've talked about on the podcast before with others, is that assumption or competitor analysis becomes the forefront of what every new feature or every new product that they want to build. That's the only thing they sort of focus on, right? The top end of the business, the co-founders, the CEOs, or whoever's in charge of that particular function has comes up with the idea, or they identify a problem. They say, right, this is how we're going to solve it, and that's just based off what they assume it to be. They assume the problem to be, and how the solution is there, or they look at our direct competitors are doing this, so let's just do it, because that's what they're doing, so it must be working, right? But I think the ability to really engage with the user base that you have, really fully understand what they want and what works, what doesn't work, and as you well know, Timo, the design process from discovery through to what the actual end visuals look like can be a very lengthy, can be a very complicated process. It's not just here's a problem, we'll ask what the users want, bang, it's solved. Sometimes there's a lot of things that you try that don't work. The process can be quite difficult, but it's about getting to that end goal. And of course, when you release that new feature or that new product, sometimes it's not going to work either. Sometimes it is about going back and starting again. But yeah,
absolutely.
Cool. Now I wanted to move on to the next topic, the next main topic that we wanted to cover off here, and that was, of course, hiring designers in an early stage startup as well. So I know you were there from the start. Obviously, a lot of the design work initially was done by yourself. What point did it get to where you thought, right, now we're at this particular point in the company's progress, I potentially need some help? When did that point come to you, do you think?
Yeah, but at 2 points. The first point was when we just thought, okay, let's create a cool company and hire people.
Yeah.
So which was the wrong time, obviously. And the second time was when I just couldn't do it all alone anymore. When I was the bottleneck because developers couldn't continue with interfaces, when marketing couldn't run a campaign because there was a brochure missing or so on. And so then we started to hire, and we also then had the money, we had some funding to actually pay for people. Yeah, that was the right time then.
Sure. And when, obviously, I know you said you're a bit of a perfectionist to start off with, and obviously you had to learn, I wouldn't say the hard way, but you had to learn that obviously it's not all about necessarily creating picture perfect designs all the time. So when you decided to look to hire, or what, when you're looking at designers, what specifically are you looking for? I think typically from hiring managers, I get to know quite a lot about portfolios. I've spoken about a lot on the podcast before, what you look for in portfolios. But of course, I wanted to ask what you specifically look for when you see a designer's portfolio, but also what outside of the portfolio is important to you when you're speaking or interviewing people. What are you looking for as an overall?
Yeah. So obviously every company has different requirements. I think my personal view is a little uncommon here, but I would actually say I don't really care about portfolios because I don't have one by myself, but I know that I have a lot of experience from the past 5 years. And actually, when someone says, for example, okay, I've been doing this and this and this, and I didn't want to spend time on creating a portfolio, I'm like, okay, cool. Let's have a look at what you did, right? So they can just explain. And what I would say, apart from a portfolio, what I generally look for in people are like three core things. Number one is personality. Number two is problem solving. And number three is a sense for aesthetics. And number one, the personality. Obviously, everyone wants to work with cool people who are fun to be around and who can nicely communicate their ideas, who have good social skills. So I would actually say, if you're a designer looking for a job, invest into your personality and these sort of social skills, personal development. Number two, this whole thing, problem solving, really means, okay, how good are you at having a complex situation, having a complex problem, understanding it, taking these challenging requirements, and then building a simple, a sophisticated solution to solve it. And at the end, it's less about how that looks like, right? If I only show the result, what can I do with this, right? In a portfolio, I want to see, okay, like, what was the problem? How did you tackle it? Like, what is the smart idea that you had that no one else had at the end to solve it? And that's something you can really good explain in an interview, right? And the third, the sense for aesthetics, obviously that's where a portfolio can play an important role, just to show what general sense you have here. But I personally think ACV can also show that. And you know that I've actually rejected some candidates because the CV looked not nice.
Of course.
But I think it really just shows that you don't have the sense for aesthetics. A good designer, in my opinion, I mean, it's different for only these people who do, for example, like UX research and so on, right? They can, they must be these visual geniuses, but a good designer, in my eyes, has an intrinsic passion to create nice things, and they wouldn't ship a shitty CV. I hope I'm allowed to say this on the podcast.
Yeah, of course.
They wouldn't ship it. Like, they would personally have something inside them telling you, I can do this, right? This is the perfectionist part that's inside of a designer. And if you don't have that, I don't know if a job in design is actually right for you. I'm very honest. I feel like this sense for aesthetics, you can't really learn that. You can improve in that area, obviously, but if you're really coming from a background where you don't have that, I don't know if it's the right thing. And we often get these applications from people who, for example, did a career foundry course and they now want to go into design, and they have this sort of picture perfect portfolio, and they show, okay, here's the perfect research process, and I created user personas and so on. But I would focus less on tools and methods, because everyone can learn tools and methods, right? I don't really care. Some people still like use these graphs to show, okay, how good are my InDesign skills? How good are my Figma skills? Like, I don't really care about tools. You can learn any tool, right? So personality, problem solving, and a general sense for aesthetics that's sort of deeply rooted in your character.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, I think it's a funny concept, because obviously, as you said, it should sort of, someone who's putting forward a CV, if it's, I know a lot of the comments you've made about some of the CVs is that, there's misalignments there, there's the spacing is off, and there's different fonts, whatever it might be. But it also almost like should annoy them as a designer that it doesn't look good, right? And they should look at that and go, the misalignment there, the different fonts, the spacing, it's annoying that it doesn't look really good on the page.
Absolutely.
I'm a big believer. I think that most people would believe that, as a designer, portfolio is probably more relevant, more important, because it should display the work that the designer has done. But I also really think that CV is still important for a designer. I have the constant battle with a lot of people that I work with and a lot of people that I speak to just get rid of like the traditional shitty CVs that I see, where it's just like job title and then here's like my really generic responsibilities and tasks that I had in this particular role. Because, and I made a video about it on LinkedIn as well. But I don't understand, unless even the best designers out there, the best engineers, the best whoever it might be, if you don't portray that on your CV and you don't portray that on your portfolio, how is a hiring manager meant to know that you're the best designer or engineer? The CVs I always see are, as I said, just generic. This is what I did, like 3 or 4 bullet points of task responsibilities. And I say to everyone I work with, you put yourself in a hiring manager's shoes right now, look at your CV and tell me, does that blow you away? And they always go, well, no. And I'm like, so why do you think it's going to blow the hiring manager away that you're applying for, right? With designers, generally, you would have, you're there to solve problems. You're there to build new features, build new products. So tell us that on your CV. You don't have to write paragraphs and paragraphs about it, of course, but tell us what you worked on specifically. Tell us what your individual tasks and responsibilities were. Tell us the impact of that and how that actually affected the company's growth or the company's success, the individual team success, the product success. If you did something incredible that increased conversion rate by a percentage or something like that, tell us that. That's what hiring managers want to look for, because they're like, wow, this person is actually, has a focus on outcomes, has a focus on improving things, being successful there, as opposed to just writing really generic things that pretty much any designer or engineer could write in their role, right? I agree with.
Also,
go on, sorry.
Speaking about just the whole business mindset, especially in an early stage startup, so important, right? And actually, one of the last candidates we signed, I was convinced at the moment I read the headline of he had a short folio, like there wasn't really a lot of projects shown. It was just a mix of a CV and a portfolio. It would only say, okay, I've worked on this project, here's one shot of this, basically. But the headline of this page really showed me that he understands what value we want to create with design, right? That it's at the end about the business growth and about like user centricity and creating value. And so it kind of, this one sentence sort of showed off how he thinks and acts as a person, and that he regards design as a tool to create business value at the end. I think that also really matters.
Yeah, definitely. I think certainly the more senior you get in your design career, the business side of things probably becomes a bit more predominant and becomes more effective. But certainly when you join an early stage startup, if you're one of the early members of the team, generally you're going to take on a lot more responsibility than you would if you joined a Delivery Hero, HelloFresh in Berlin, for instance, right? You're going to take on a lot more of that very early on, as opposed to, if you were a much larger business, you might be a very small part of a very small feature of the products that they're building, right? But when you're at an early stage startup, there's going to be a lot more responsibility you take on your shoulders. So I think no matter what level you're at, I think you should definitely have a big focus on making sure your CV displays obviously your core values as a designer, shows that you have an understanding at least of the business side of things, but make yourself look good, make yourself stand out. I just don't understand. I think it's a common problem across any industry really when writing CVs, because there's lots of templates out there now. That people just go, right, I'll just use this template and I'll just sort of follow, like some templates even have like suggested bullet points, like actually you say I'm a designer and then it will just come up with like a paragraph of like generic stuff designers do, and they just use that, and it's so far away from where it needs to be. Last question I just wanted to cover off you really, Timo, was obviously designers, I think it's like the Spotify model everyone talks about, where obviously designers work cross-functionally with other people in the product team, a marketing team, whether it might be engineering teams generally. I think research has become a separate function of recent. A lot more companies are looking to build out separate dedicated research teams alongside the product design team now, but to also work cross-functionally with the other guys. In an ideal world, if you had unlimited resources and everything like that, not necessarily, it doesn't have to be at Sdui, but just in general, how you see it best working, how would you see designers best collaborating with the other members of the cross-functional teams?
It's a tough one. To be very honest, we are still working on.
Yeah.
We have so often figured out things on the way, and some things work in companies like in others, but not for us, and the other way around. So I think, well, let's speak about where we are at the moment, and then what I think would be ideal in the future. So we've come from being one huge product team, and basically 1 or 2 designers who would serve that huge product team, to having squads. So we have 3 squads, and they work on various parts of the app. And our goal is at the moment to get 1 designer for each of the squad, and also then have sort of a good balance of UX heavy people who are good with concepts and also UX copywriting in a startup, right? You can't have a separate person for that, but rather this part, and then people who are strong with UI and making things pixel perfect, and easy to develop. And so this whole research part, I think it's good for when we run interviews. We would often also have a developer to join that the user interview, because I think everyone working on the product needs to have an understanding of what the user thinks like. I think that's super important. And so I would actually still want to have every designer and also every developer at some point occasionally be involved in user research and interviews. But I don't know at what point it makes sense to have an own person who only does research. To be very open, I can't really speak about that. I think in some greater companies it can make a lot of sense. We don't have experience with it yet. But obviously research is an important part, and I like to how to say, to have people doing research who sort of also can imagine solutions, like not only research only. If you don't really ever have an idea how you could turn something into an interface, I think you don't always know how to ask the right questions. Maybe so, but that's also just a personal thought.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's massively case by case, isn't it? I think different companies will have different views on whether dedicated researchers are needed or necessary. I think certainly I think the generalist product designer these days will need to be involved in user research or conduct their own user research, conduct their own user interviews. I think it's a really great point that you made, though, about having developers, having everyone who's going to be involved in that whole product discovery part should be involved in that at some point to really understand what their users are wanting, so they can really gain the concept of why they're doing this, why they're building these specific parts or specific features into the product, for sure. Cool.
By the way, there's a quick shout out to a friend of mine who's founding a product or a company called Product Lane, and they have a sort of addition to Linear, where you can more easily gather feedback, for example, from user interviews, to make that accessible for the whole company. So that's something I guess is really important in the future for any company, because I realize it affects also management decisions, right? When we have 2 features and we need to decide which one we're going to build, like in the next quarter when it's a very large one. Then at some point when it's about resources, about roadmaps, about priorities, management would be involved, and like C-level even saying, okay, we need this first or this first, but they don't have the same sense for the user's needs as those people who run the interviews, who do the research. So I think independent from what tool they use, whether they use like Product Lane or anything else, it's good to make insights from research accessible to a larger group of the company, and also to management.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that point. I think it 100% should influence management decisions, especially when there's the weighing up of options. If you've got options, which features to build first, having access to that research will of course make their decision probably a lot easier, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And for example, what they want to do at Product Lane is when you record an interview, and you would have a snippet where someone talks about a specific problem, a specific need or feature, you could directly attach that to your ticket in your like Linear or Jira software, so that it is easily accessible. I think that's a key role, because so often we would have people in the company who make decisions but who don't really have a feeling for the user, and we try to minimize that.
Yeah, definitely. It goes back to obviously top level making decisions based off assumption on what they deem the solution to be. But having a tool like this will certainly help that in the future. Timo, been an absolute pleasure having you on. Really appreciate your time, of course. Looking forward to meeting you in Berlin next week as well.
Absolutely.
But yeah, again, real pleasure. Have a great day, and we'll catch up soon.
Thank you very much, Matt. Bye.
Bye.